Pennsylvania has 580,000 uh, people of Puerto Rican descent. And now, in a state which could be decided by tens of thousands, even thousands of votes, that's a significant block. We can't say that all Puerto Ricans vote the same way. We can't say that they all have the same priority issue. We can't even say that they'll react the same way to those offensive, vulgar remarks by a podcaster calling Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. We can't even say how they'll react to the memory that Donald Trump held up $20 billion of federal assistance to Puerto Rico as it was reeling from that damage. But I think it's safe to say that a lot of Puerto Ricans will be disconcerted that the Trump rally could feature such a hateful, despicable remark. And I think when we say it's not just Puerto Ricans, I think there will be a lot of people who are not Puerto Ricans who will be at the least discomfited by those remarks. Uh, and I think we have to go even broader than that. I mean, while I understand why you're focusing on that comment, because it's gotten the headlines, let's recall that this rally was filled with vitriol and hate, that there were vile sexual slurs about Hispanic and Latino voters, even as Trump is supposedly courting their votes, slurs that I can't repeat on air. There were insults of black voters, even as Trump is supposedly courting them. Trump is supposedly courting the Arab American vote in the context of Gaza. Yet Rudy Giuliani, his former lawyer, said Palestinians are taught to kill Americans from the age of 2. Kamala Harris was called prostitute, the devil, the Antichrist. Hillary Clinton was derided with this, a vulgar insult that I can't repeat here. And far from distancing himself from those comments, Trump actually embraced that division. He embraced that confrontation, and he threatened again to use the military against enemies within, which is his phrase for any Americans who expressed opposition to his views and his actions, not just extremists and radicals. So what I'm putting out there is that I think it is another variable in a toss-up election, but to try to say it's the decisive variable, well, the problem here is that you have a very damaged American political culture, and whether issues and Trump's threat overtake the spectacle, the circus that has propelled him this far, I can't make that judgment call yet. I do think that the timing of this is very important because since the single debate between Trump and Harris, I think around the 10th of September, we have not had a catalytic event that defines this election. Trump refused to do any other debates. So the Trump campaign could kind of hope that it would just steal the news cycle, sometimes with outrageous remarks, and that it wouldn't be held to account. And that would be the way that they would build up this momentum to try to defeat Harris. Now, I think last weekend, the combination of two very different images were significant. I think you had Trump's rally on the Sunday, but just before that, you had Michelle Obama's appearance with Kamala Harris in Michigan. And you had Michelle Obama, although she was speaking primarily about women's rights, especially reproductive rights, asking what side of history do you want to be on? And saying that the stakes were too great to sit this one out, and that, let's not, beat around the bush, that lives are at stake, including women's lives are at stake here. Now, if people are starting to pay attention, you've got that message. And then you got Kamala Harris just hours before the Trump rally saying this is an election with two competing visions of America. One vision which she puts forward of being the way forward, of being cooperation rather than confrontation, of being dialogue rather than division. And then you get, the Trump hate fest that follows this. And it did change the media narrative. For weeks, a lot of the so-called mainstream American media have been both sides in this. Well, on the one hand, Trump does this, but on the other hand, Harris does this. Or they have been trying to normalize Trump, right? At one point calling some of his bizarre antics political improvisation. So the New York Times comes out and says, "Look, this is a rally which was racist. This was misogynist. This was hate-filled." You get other outlets talking about the crude language that was used. And I would say, if we left it at that, in a toss-up election, perhaps that is the key shift that takes place. But here, as I speak to you on a Wednesday, the Trump outlets, who of course ignored all of this on Sunday, they ignored all that hatred. They talked about Fox talked about an exhilarating rally filled with Americans who took pride in their country, never even paid attention to the remarks. Here they are on the Wednesday, and the Trump outlets are saying, oh, the real story is that Joe Biden, who I think, made a statement that was not politically smart, uh, implied that Trump supporters are garbage rather than Puerto Rico. And so they could try to change that news cycle. Uh, Now, will that be successful? I can't tell you because something else could happen in the next 6 days. I think what I would say is this. What the events of the last 72 hours have done is they've increased the chance of even higher turnout. Uh, in 2020, remember, well, actually, let me walk this back. In 2016, remember, the Democrats did not lose because Trump surged. They lost because people sat on their hands and did not vote, especially in the state of Michigan. In 2020, the Democrats won because it was one of the highest turnouts in recent U.S. history. I think it was close to 70%, and that favors them. If these events increase and boost turnout, I think that favors the Democrats, which is why, with all the news outlets chasing their tails over the polls and just simply turning this into a horse race and avoiding discussion of issues, I wouldn't do that. I would not say the polls indicate anything definitive about this race, but just simply point to the importance of, if the Democrats turn out their people, they probably win. If the Trumpists turn out their people or the Democrats don't, then Trump may get back into the White House. I think what has happened in the last 72 hours is going to raise the turnout. I think you already have evidence from the early voting that we are going to get a high turnout. Georgia, North Carolina were recording record turnouts. I think the early returns from Pennsylvania are pointing to a high turnout there. But I think the elevation finally of the issues, and I think women's rights through Michelle Obama's speech is a good example. I think that could boost turnout. Uh, I think that Trump unwittingly highlighting his threat to America. I mean, America is an idea as well to the U.S. system. I think that might boost turnout. Um, I think the Trump people know that. And I think the problem they have here is that they can't depress turnout. They can't then say, well, everybody don't go vote. I think what they have to do is then double down on getting their folks out to the polls as well. And that's never a bad thing. It's never a bad thing when you talk about get out the vote. Um, and I think I'll add one thing I saw today because I'm not a big fan of the U.S. media narrative, how they play this election. While recognizing that Jennifer O'Malley Dillon is the Harris campaign manager, while recognizing that she'll spin when she puts out a message, she put out a lengthy message on social media that said, look, this is an important election. It's going to be close, but we're not anxious. We're not anxious here. So all that talk of the Democrats panicking or being jittery, and I genuinely thought that despite the fact that Dillon might be spinning, I saw something there which is like they actually think the early turnout, the early voting returns actually are pointing that they are in better shape than what the media is saying. It's still close, still very, very tight election, but I think they're counting on the fact they've got a better ground game than the Trump people, and that ground game will turn out more folks next Tuesday uh, than maybe the media are expecting at this point. I can't imagine that the Trump folks are very happy uh, the way that Madison Square Garden rally turned out. And of course, they did distance themselves from that one remark by Tony Hinchcliffe, the podcaster. about Puerto Rico as an island of garbage, didn't distance themselves from any of the other remarks. It should be noted. But they did show a little bit of concern that they weren't getting the great press they expected because they wanted attention to this. That's why it was in Madison Square Garden. But their reaction, of course, is just attack, 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 and hope that they grab the news cycle back. So while they were discomfited, I do think they know that they've got certain outlets that, are effectively their mouthpieces. Fox is the best known. And that they simply were going to double down on Fox with the attack lines that no, it's the Democrats who are the threat. It's Kamala Harris, who is the menace here. Here, well, good Americans support us. And I do think that Joe Biden's gaffe, where, he made that specific remark, just as Hillary Clinton shouldn't have called Trump supporters deplorables in 2016, Biden shouldn't have indicated they were garbage. And even though you walk that back, I think the Trump folks say, all right, this is where we can attack, which is why you have almost every element of right wing media is just going wall to wall with this and ignoring any other issue. And we'll try to hold that for at least the next 24, 48 hours because it sucks the oxygen out of the room. We don't want to be talking about women's rights. We don't want to be talking about the threat to democracy. In a way, we don't even want to be talking about the economy because they're not sure that Trump as a candidate can hold it together on the economy. So, the best way of portraying this is, look at what the Democrats have done. They're the enemies within, to use Trump's own phrase. Well, Kamala Harris will be in swing states throughout this week. She is today. But the reason why the Harris campaign framed the Tuesday event at the White House ellipse as being putting that closing argument was symbolic. It's symbolic that this is where less than 4 years ago, Donald Trump called on his supporters to prevent the orderly transfer of power to Joe Biden. This was the culmination of months of attempts to overturn the 2020 election. So they were representing how far this man went. It was a coup attempt, if you want to be blatant about it, even though Harris didn't use exactly those words. So you have that symbolic location, you have that event, which is a marker of what Trump is like, and then you make the closing argument. That threat is still there. That threat is still there to the system. Is this the man you want? And Harris juxtaposing freedom versus division. Is that what you really want? And I think it worked. I think, again, the Trump folks will try to sweep it away with Biden's remark about garbage, and that's all right. But I think it sticks. I think Harris's message sticks. We just don't know with how many people it sticks. We don't know how many people make that their priority issue, which is the overriding threat. But I have to say that Trump gave them that opening with the Madison Square Garden rally. And even as he makes his own appearances in the next few days, there will be increased scrutiny of him because the American media, it runs as a pack, right? And they've gone through the phase from late July when Harris entered the race to the start of September. She's surging, she's surging, she's surging. Then after the debate until now, they've run as a pack and said, oh, she's plateaued, she's plateaued, she's plateaued. What we now have is these last few frenetic days. And there will be these appearances in the swing states where any remark by Harris or Trump could be seized upon about the pack is, could this be the unexpected decider that takes place? And which means, again, anybody that predicts this election is a fool. Sorry, they're absolute fool because both what might occur in the next 6 days and the media's framing of it, that's beyond the predictable at this point.